Why would a man blessed with extraordinary wisdom make such a surprising choice in his personal life? This is a full Bible story of Solomon and his 1,000 wives and concubines. Chapter 1. Solomon chosen by God. Wisdom above all, the reign of King David, the warrior poet of Israel, was drawing to a close. His body had grown weak, but God's covenant remained strong. The future of Israel rested not in David's fading strength, but in God's promise that one of his sons would reign after him. Yet the throne did not wait quietly. Adonijah, David's older son, exalted himself. Without consulting God or his father, he gathered chariots, soldiers, and influential supporters. A feast was prepared, sacrifices offered, and Adonijah declared himself king. But Solomon, the son God had chosen, was excluded. Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, remembered the promise God had made through David. With the prophet Nathan, she went before the aging king. David's spirit stirred, and clarity returned to his voice. "Solomon, my son, shall reign after me," he declared. At once, Solomon was placed on the king's mule and anointed by Zadok the priest. Trumpets sounded through Jerusalem. The people shouted with joy, and the city shook with celebration. Adonijah's supporters scattered in fear, and Adonijah himself clung to the altar, begging for mercy. Solomon spared his life, revealing a reign that would begin not with vengeance but restraint. When David died, Solomon inherited a united kingdom, but also an enormous responsibility. Israel was strong, wealthy, and respected. But Solomon knew that ruling God's people required more than power. At Gibeon, Solomon offered sacrifices to the Lord. That night, God appeared to him in a dream. "Ask for whatever you want me to give you," God said. The invitation was limitless. Solomon could have asked for long life, riches, or victory over enemies. Instead, he humbled himself. "I am young and do not know how to carry out my duties," he said. "Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong." God was pleased. Because Solomon asked for wisdom rather than selfish gain, God granted him unparalleled understanding. Wisdom unlike any before or after him. God also promised wealth and honor, blessings Solomon had not requested. Soon Solomon's wisdom was tested. 2 women stood before him, each claiming to be the mother of the same child. With no witnesses and identical stories, the case seemed impossible. Solomon ordered a sword brought forth and proposed dividing the child in 2. One woman cried out in anguish, begging for the child's life. The other agreed coldly. Solomon knew the truth. The living child was given to the woman who loved him enough to let him go. Israel stood in awe. They recognized that God's wisdom lived in their king. Solomon's reign began with divine favor, humility, and obedience. But wisdom, like strength, must be guarded, and the test of Solomon's heart had only begun. Chapter 2. Wisdom, Wealth, and Worldwide Fame. Under Solomon's rule, Israel entered a golden age. Peace surrounded the nation, allowing prosperity to flourish without interruption. Solomon organized his officials, strengthened infrastructure, and secured trade routes stretching across the known world. Wisdom flowed through everything he did. Solomon spoke thousands of proverbs and composed songs beyond counting. He studied nature, animals, plants, and the rhythms of life. Kings and scholars from distant lands came to Jerusalem just to hear him speak. Israel became the intellectual and cultural center of the ancient world. Then came the temple. Solomon spent 7 years building a house for the Lord, sparing no expense. Cedar from Lebanon, gold from Ophir, and skilled artisans worked together to create a dwelling worthy of God's name. When the temple was completed, Solomon stood before the altar and prayed. He acknowledged that no building could contain the Creator of heaven and earth. Yet he asked God to let his name dwell there. to hear prayers offered from that place. Fire fell from heaven. God's glory filled the temple, and the people fell face down in worship. God appeared to Solomon again, reaffirming his promise, but with a warning. Obedience would bring blessing. Disobedience would bring loss. As Solomon's fame spread, so did his wealth. Gold became common. Silver was considered of little value. Trade flourished. Alliances expanded. And with alliances came marriages. Chapter 3. Why God allowed Solomon's many wives. God never commanded Solomon to take many wives. In fact, centuries earlier, God had warned Israel's kings not to multiply wives, wealth, or horses, because doing so would turn their hearts away from him. Deuteronomy 17:17. So why did God allow Solomon to have 1,000 wives and concubines? Because God allows human freedom, even when it leads to failure. In the ancient world, royal marriages were political tools. Kings married foreign women to secure peace treaties, trade routes, and national stability. Solomon's marriages helped Israel avoid war and expand influence without bloodshed. God allowed Solomon to operate within cultural realities, but never removed his command. Permission was not approval. Solomon began by marrying for diplomacy. But over time, wisdom became confidence. Confidence became indulgence. What began as political tolerance became personal attachment. God did not stop Solomon because love cannot be forced. Obedience must be chosen. Chapter 4. When love turned Solomon's heart. Away, Solomon loved many foreign women, 700 wives, 300 concubines. Scripture speaks plainly. They turned his heart after other gods. Solomon did not abandon God overnight. He compromised slowly. He allowed altars for foreign gods to be built, not because he rejected the Lord, but because he tolerated what God forbade. Love blurred conviction. The wisest man on earth failed to guard his heart. God's patience endured, but holiness demands faithfulness. Chapter 5. The cost of compromise. A kingdom divided God confronted Solomon. Because of his unfaithfulness, God declared the kingdom would be torn apart, though not during Solomon's lifetime, for David's sake. Enemies rose. Peace faded. Solomon's later years were marked by unrest. After Solomon's death, Israel divided into two kingdoms, never to reunite. Solomon's story ends as a warning written in history. God allowed Solomon's wives, but they cost him everything. Wisdom without obedience leads to ruin. Blessing without faithfulness leads to loss. Yet even here, grace remains. God's promises endure, even when human hearts fail.